Welcome inside another episode of Mountaineer Report here on WVU Sports Now. I am Mike Asti and joined alongside by Cody Nespor. We have a new basketball season now underway. The Darian DeVries era has started. The Mountaineers do have a victory under Darian DeVries' belt already and a pretty convincing win, but Robert Morris, so what really to make of it? The football team is looking at some very important games ahead, a Final Four stretch that Neal Brown has absolutely referred to as very important and as games that will kind of tell the story of their entire season. We'll talk about the magnitude of those games, maybe what it could mean for the quarterback battle, and if there can be a controversy in the future. There's not one right now because Garrett Green is doubtful for this game, so Nico's going to play. But what if Nico plays well again? Brown has made it clear he doesn't want to strip a guy's job, a QB's job, off an injury. But imagine benching Nico after back-to-back great games, back-to-back victories if they beat Cincinnati on the road. And then maybe, depending on how long this goes, we will touch on some news of the day. So, Cody, before we get to football, it's been all headline football city here on pretty much all of these shows and certainly recent weeks and months. But now the basketball season has started. So it appears this is now currently, at least one game in, a coaching staff, a head coach that most of the fan base is now behind. They liked what they saw from one game, but it was one matchup against Robert Morris. That's a game that was up in the air a year ago, and West Virginia lost some bye games a year ago. They won this game going away. Robert Morris was never in it. Tucker DeVries did go off a bit. You were there covering it. What did you, and you wrote about it already, but here for the show, what did you make of West Virginia's debut performance under Darian DeVries and Tucker DeVries? Because he's the NBA prospect that's going to lead this team one way or the other.
I think obviously the start was exceptional, and I think that was that's important just insofar that like that's going to get people excited. Like first game of the new coach, and you run out to 21-0.
Yep.
Like that's going to capture attention. That's going to excite people more than just like if it had been a normal 20-point blowout kind of game. And especially that first 8 minutes, I really think is kind of like a showcase. Like this is the best version of this team, and it's kind of like a little teaser to like fans of like, hey, this is the best version of this team. Get excited for this, even if it's not. If it's not the team that plays for 40 minutes, like this is the team that
never saw that run a year ago, no matter against who. Never saw that. Yeah.
Even in the Kansas win that.
Right.
Right. But yeah, so I think, and you're right. It is, it's a 10-win mid-major who probably isn't going to be very good. Yeah. But, I think the way in which they started and the way in which they just completely dominated, the first 8-10 minutes, I think that, people obviously loved it, and I think it's good for excitement and encouragement and all the feel-good stuff.
Yeah, it had to happen, and it had to happen that way. You do want to have a game like that to kind of tune up. You could argue it's almost an exhibition type of game. Robert Morris, I'm sure, made the trip from Moon Township down to Morgantown knowing they weren't going to win the game. But there's a difference between winning a game or even beating a program like that and then dominating them to the point that you're a little bit kind of making a statement that, okay, it might take a couple years to get this full era underway under a new head coach. Ren Baker's even been honest about that, but this is different already. There's already progress from a year ago. There's already improvement from a year ago. This team has talent to mop the floor with a program like Robert Morris, and they're going to do that. They're not going to toy with them. They're not going to make it be closer than it was. Because even in wins last year, really even the last couple years, even the end of Huggins, sometimes they would toy with teams that clearly they had more talent than. And I think also with Tucker DeVries going off, even the end of Huggins, even when they made the NCAA tournament with Eric Stevenson and that group, a lot of fans were saying, okay, maybe Huggins can still get him to the tournament. Yeah, West Virginia's going to get you to a certain point at least. Obviously, the computers liked him enough, despite not winning, to get him there. The computers actually favor the history of the brand and the Big 12. Fine. But to actually make a run and do a Sweet 16, Elite 8, Final Four ever again, there got to be an NBA prospect on this team, and there hasn't been one since Miles McBride, who is clearly a spark plug for the Knicks right now. Tucker DeVries could be that guy. There have been many national analysts that said that he would have been at a major program if it was not for wanting to play for his father, and they thought he was an NBA player back at Drake. He's there now. It's only one game in, but what did you see from him? Do you think he has the ability throughout this full season to be a star in the Big 12 and actually be somebody that could get drafted in the NBA and not just get that cup of coffee in summer league?
Yeah, I think so. Obviously, and I kind of wrote about this. Like, he was 9th in the country in scoring last year, right, in the Missouri Valley Conference. So it's like, back-to-back Conference Player of the Year. So it's like, he's good. He can play. It was different for me seeing it with my own eyes, of like the first 3 possessions on offense were all him, and it was like very clearly like, oh, this is the best guy on the court. Nobody else is close to this guy. And then, but to see with my own eyes, like the first 3 was 2 or 3 steps behind the line, just full confidence, just shoot it and make it, and then the fast break dunk, and then the other 3, and then the one where he drew the foul with the guy running into him, and he just chucked it up there, and it still went in.
Yeah.
It's like seeing that kind of stuff. It's like, oh, this is an extremely confident player,
like a confidence, like an NBA confidence,
with very high level of talent. And then the other thing that I took note of, and I don't know if it comes through on the TV, but if you watch on defense, he's making all the calls. I mean, he's pointing out everything, every action, screens, going under or over, back in transition, he's pointing who to take where. He's leading the huddle anytime there's a stop. Like, that's something I noticed of like, oh, this guy's running this team. Like, these guys have no experience together, but he's very clearly the leader of this team right now.
Well, he knows the system more than anybody else. That's his father. He played under him in college, but also clearly was coached by him prior to college. So there's nobody, including the assistant coaches, that know that system as well as Tucker DeVries. And obviously, West Virginia only gets 1 year of him. Unfortunately, this is not going to be a 2, 3, 4-year run. If you had Tucker DeVries and Darian DeVries in this system for 3, 4 years, maybe that could be something. But that's probably part of that. But you don't normally see the leading scorer also running the defense, also acting like a coach on the court. Usually, if you're doing one of those things, you're sacrificing the other, or even 2 out of 3 for a full-on star. But checking all 3 of those, and maybe it's just Robert Morris, but I imagine the leading the huddle, the knowing the system, the galvanizing the guys, the leadership thing, that's going to happen every game. I'd imagine. He's clearly the guy that's going to take that last shot if they're in a buzzer beater scenario. And I think the confidence is big too. And even the confidence for him to throw up 18 in a game, maybe wanted more against that competition. But that, I think, also breeds confidence in him as this schedule keeps on moving. Now, you wrote about it. I tweeted about it. It's out there. It's obvious. Everyone's been talking about it. Even Darian DeVries brought it up. It's the elephant in the room. The only issue from the game, even winning as big as they did, is rebounding. And as great as Tucker DeVries is, he's not going to be top 10 in the nation in rebounding. That's not his game. They don't have anybody at 7 foot plus on this team. That is the one spot that Ethan and I talked about a lot. They didn't even really put, I don't want to say an effort because I'm sure they tried, but there was not a visible public effort in even really recruiting multiple bigs. They got one. He's not even the tallest guy in the world, and that's it. And then it was just tons of guard offers and kind of fielding this team. It almost came off like they thought to themselves, which Darian DeVries even alluded to a post game, that we're just not going to get the big that's some superstar. So we're building it this way, and we're going to have to figure it out. But we know rebounding could be a problem unless we figure it out. Didn't look good against RMU. What was said, and what do you think can be done, or is that just simply going to stop them from being an NCAA tournament team?
Yeah. So what was said, I mean, the things they always say, it's like, we're just going to continue to work on it. We got to get physical, got to bump around. Because the reality is they're not big. They're not a big lineup. They can't. They really don't even have the bodies to, if they wanted to go big,
Yeah.
Um,
Size cannot matter to this team. They cannot
right.
support size being mattering. We'll find out if size matters, though,
So, but what they can
as the
do
season
though,
goes on. Yeah.
if you look at Amari Hansberry, he's going to be the starting center. He's 6'8". If he's going
Okay.
to be your five, your main five, you got to play to what he does. And he's tall and he's pretty bulky, but he moves pretty well. It's like if he's going to be your center, just play small, right? Play really aggressive on defense. You know, get up on the ball handler. Don't let teams get into the block. And then if you get beat on the boards, you get beat on the boards. But like try to take size out of defense as much as possible. And the other thing is, and if we go back to last year's women's team, they were horrendous rebounders.
They
Right?
were. They had a
But
great year. Yeah.
they caused so many turnovers
That's true.
that possession, the number of possessions each team had always favored them. And I
Yeah.
think if you look at how the Mountaineers played defense last night, it looks to me like they're going to take that same approach. Like, hey, if they beat us by 10 rebounds, let's beat them by 10 turnovers. Right?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Because then if you just think about rebounds and turnovers as who gets possession,
Yeah.
it all evens out. And so that's what I would assume the strategy is going to be, because you can't put lifts in the guy's shoes. And
No, that's what I mean. And the other issue
making
is,
6'10".
and you're going to deal with, you figure, knock on wood for the team, they've already had one player out so far, already dealing with one injury. But yeah, if Hansberry's out for any extended period of time, there's not even really a five. I mean, you
Yeah.
put somebody there, but like they don't even have one. So they almost have to do it this way. And you did write about this other end of it too, that maybe the RMU game and the rebounding numbers that everyone can point to and say, wow, it's worse than even I thought. They're getting killed at the glass against that team. Part of that is RMU missed a lot of shots.
Yeah.
So they're missing shots, and then they're right near the missed shot. So they're going to get the board off the missed shot, or they're ready for the shot that they're just chucking up there.
Yeah.
The game kind of unfolded for RMU to maybe win rebounding, but because they couldn't hit shots, it didn't matter, and West Virginia was not going to have it hurt them. Obviously, you're going to need to rebound better in the Big 12. There are going to be teams there that can really rebound in the Big 12. Baylor was able to go national title run really off of size. You got to figure that's going to be a problem in conference play, but it's going to be what you're saying. Yeah. Can they generate steals? Can they switch the possession? Will the effort be there? Can they try to scrap up the rebounds? That's the only thing that I think is a similar conversation to last year, if you recall. That was the whole conversation going into last year, that even when they thought the team could be together and could shoot, can there be rebounding? That's kind of been the theme, again, even from the end of Huggins. They haven't had a NBA prospect. They haven't had a true rebounder. And size, once again, could be a problem for this team, for sure.
Yeah. And the other thing is, if they can play fast enough, which is kind of how that game started last night, is they played so fast. If they can play fast enough, they could maybe make the opponent play small. And that's what I was talking about with Hansberry. Like, if he can stretch and get out and run enough, maybe the other team is forced to take out their 7-footer, right? Maybe Kansas can't go big like they want to.
Sure.
But that's a big if.
Or maybe playing small, and maybe this is the strategy. I don't necessarily want to accuse him of this, but maybe the strategy also is that, okay, if you're playing small and running, gunning, and hitting shots, it's fine. If you're playing small and running, gunning, and you're missing some shots, maybe you almost want to try to lure the bigs on the opponent into foul trouble.
Yeah.
Because there are referees that just off a pure natural
off of size,
it just when they see a big difference in size, they're going to lean to the smaller guy in terms of fouls.
Yeah.
Shaq complained about it his whole career. That kind of is the thing. Yeah. So,
if you remember, that used to happen to Derek Culver.
Yeah, and that was the flip side. West Virginia endured that. He was really the last big that they've really had that could rebound. So, he would get in foul trouble because the other team would try to play smaller and get him into foul trouble. And if West Virginia can flip the script and do that to the opponent, and at minimum do it for 5 minutes, get that guy in foul trouble, get him off the court, and then it's small versus small and just try to hit shots, or say you have the NBA player in Tucker DeVries, that maybe is where you have more of a chance here. Cody Nespor, Mike Asti, WV Sports Now. The Mountaineers, Darian DeVries' Mountaineers, are 1-0. The win was over Robert Morris, but Tucker DeVries did have a solid night, to say the least, and they did have a game that would at least make Mountaineer fans also feel like a more entertaining brand of basketball is going to be out there. Because even if they're doing what you're saying as the strategy, and maybe it's unsuccessful in some games, as I'm sure it will be, it'll be much more fun to watch than what was out there a year ago. So even that attempt and that not working will be more fun than what was out there a year ago. Now, Cody, to move back to football, they got a matchup with Cincinnati. We're going to be there. It's a road matchup, but it's the closest geographic game. They're going to be able to drive and do the whole stop and play at a small college and then get back in the car or get back on the bus and get some Skyline chili possibly and make the rest of the way. They're going to try to, make the best of the situation and try to squeeze out some wins here to end the season. And we talked about it before. Oh my God, they win these 4 in a row. They're probably still not in Dallas, but that would be another 8-win year. Then you don't know what happens in the bowl game. And they are back in the freaking conference race, to be literal, because of Iowa State and Kansas State losing. If one of them loses again and West Virginia wins out and they don't play BYU, they could crawl into somehow being number 2, and that's all you got to do to get into Dallas, as weird as this year would be. Number 1, how do you see that matchup playing out? And then number 2, because this will be a future conversation as well, but I just want to kind of plant the seed for everybody. Nico's going to start. Garrett Green's doubtful. He's not healthy. If Nico gets anything close to what he did a week ago and plays well again and they win, do you think that changes Brown's mind, and should Nico play the rest of the year? Because we both heard Brown say he doesn't want to take someone's job off of an injury, and Green would still have been losing a job off being hurt. But at that point, it feels like, how can you even look the media, fans, and players in the eye if you're then pulling the plug on the guy who maybe saved the year? But to plant that seed as well.
Cincinnati's not, they're all right. To be polite, they're not great. Their defense is really bad. So
they blew a game against Pitt too.
Oh, that was a terrible collapse. So it's like this is kind of the it's fitting. This is the first game for this stretch run, because it's like, if you lose this, like, it's kind of a signal. It's like, okay, just everybody check out. Like stop caring. So but if you go on the road and you win this, it's 2 road games in a row, you win with your backup quarterback. That's not nothing.
No.
And to water the seed you planted a little bit, if Nico plays as well as he did last time, like you said, it's really hard to justify benching him. It's like, well, Garrett was the starter and he just got hurt. It's like, okay, but Nico's played the best quarterback play you've kind of gotten.
Could you imagine the scenario where if Nico throws up 80+% again, they win another road game, even though you could argue these are lesser teams this year, and Green's then back, and then he plays Green, and then Green goes out there first possession or 2, throws a pick, the opponent scores eventually. The fan base might be outside Brown's door. I mean, that would be that would be the only scenario that I think that could lead Brown being gone before the end of the year. I definitely think he's lasting the year, probably even coming back next year, barring a collapse. But if that goes on, Brown is really then sticking his neck out for Green. That just could change a lot of things, because that would be such a gutsy move on Brown's part, and it just seems like unnecessary. It seems like Nico would force his hand if he plays well and they win.
To steal a Mike Tomlinism, what do you say? It's like, that's why I'm so well compensated. Like, that's why Neal makes all that money, is to make the hard decisions and then live with the consequences.
Well, wouldn't it, you want to compare it to the Steelers and Mike Tomlin again, wouldn't the scenario be similar to kind of what Mike Tomlin dealt with a year ago, where he clearly, at the time, I want everyone to get back in their brain, because obviously Kenny Pickett's not around anymore, that situation, divorced. I get all that. I've reported on that too. But back then, when they still kind of wanted to save things with Kenny Pickett and they kind of wanted him to be the guy, he was still a few years into being that first-round draft pick, and then got hurt. Mason eventually came in and played well enough where they're winning. They eventually go to the playoffs. There were rumors and reports at the end of that year that Pickett was getting healthy enough to play. There's a whole thing about whether he wanted to be third string or not. And Mike Tomlin eventually had to, make it clear, we can't change now. That was pretty much the decision. Like, Mason's leading us to the playoffs. We'll worry about the rest later. We can't change now. and you even heard from some players, down the stretch, and some media members flat out told me, actually I had one, Jim Wexel told me on Mic Drop, that he had an anonymous player that he still hasn't named tell him, I don't know how the coaching staff would have looked us in the eye if they would have taken that guy out. Now we're back in the playoff race. That's kind of, I think, what we're alluding to. Like, you can't punt the year for your relationship with Green, even though he originally was your guy. If you're really coaching it week to week, Nico would have to stay in if he plays well for me.
Well, then that comes down to, like, do you trust Neal to like truly play who he believes is the better quarterback? Kind of. I mean, he's done that. He's benched Austin Kendall. He's benched JT Daniels.
He benched JT Daniels despite the house that the NIL was paying for. Yeah, that's
so
true.
It's like, we've seen, those are transfers. Those aren't Neal's guy, but
yeah, Green's his one guy that he really
Nico's his guy too, right?
Nico, 100%, absolutely. Actually, that, to be fair.
But at this point, I would, if whatever decision Neal makes, I would trust that it's just a straight football move. That might be naive of me, but the flip side is like
things. But yeah, I don't think Neal's stupid, as we said with the Jordan Leslie decision. Neal's just not stupid. I don't think he's going to do things that he does not believe will win games, because that's not even good for him. If they lose all 4 of these, even if everyone believes he's coming back next year, or certainly at least going to have that decision happen at the end of this season, it definitely appears that he's going to last the rest of this regular season. Yeah. If he's out there punting games for a relationship and Ren gets word of that, that's where that can change again. Yeah. So he's going to make a decision that's best for the team. A lot of this also depends on how Nico plays. If they win because of defensive turnovers and they're all playing with their hairs on fire for Jeff Kuhns, and Nico's still out there playing like he did in the backyard brawl a year ago, then he easily can go to Green. Yeah. This has to, and it might be unreasonable, because I looked this up. There was a couple years by Geno Smith, or a couple games. Geno Smith did it a couple games, one including a 90%er. Will Grier, I believe, did it once, but 80+% for WVU quarterback is incredibly rare. Nico did it once. If he does it 2 times back-to-back weeks, then I don't know how you pull the plug. But that's the seed that's been planted. Yeah.
And I think the flip side is, like, everybody's kind of down on Garrett right now. Garrett's a good player, right? Like, he was really, really good last year.
Yeah, they're proving winning from a year ago. Can't happen.
There is a scenario where Nico plays well, but Garrett is the starter in the following week anyway. But Garrett also just plays well. And that's also a scenario.
That is a scenario that might be, that is a scenario that exists. Yeah. It's hard to buy that scenario a little bit for me, because yes, Green was so great a year ago and there's potential there. And I do think the ceiling might be greater with Garrett Green than Nico. I do believe the ceiling and the big play potential is greater with Green than Nico, but I don't know where the Green you're talking about is anymore. That's my concern. If it's 2023 Garrett Green versus 2024 Nico, that is a legit debate, and I would give the edge to Garrett. If it's 2024 Garrett Green versus 2024 Nico, that right now is not close based on body of work. Nico has taken care of the football and played smarter, and he actually was able to scramble around, and there were big plays against Arizona. We will see. Cincinnati's defense is better than Arizona. We will see. That's the seed planted, though, and I'm sure Neal Brown knows I'm coming with that question after that game, because he immediately, it's not a quarterback controversy right now because Garrett Green is doubtful, and it could also be that he's still. The other scenario is that Garrett Green is really never healthy enough, and we just don't see him because of health.
Yeah,
I mean, clearly it's a concussion situation. It's longer than I think anyone would have thought. I mean, we're looking at 3 weeks now with that. Because of the bye, you would have thought it wouldn't be a doubtful thing because of injury, but that is still the case here. Cody Nespor, Mike Asti, WVU Sports Now. Just to round out the show, the news of the day as we're recording this, they do get out of a game against East Carolina on the road against East Carolina in 2026. That's, of course, led a lot of people to speculate on the future schedule. It's been such a conversation around the WVU football program more than I think any other program in the country the last 2 years, with the AD and head coach being so open. You don't see that anywhere else either on what they want out of the schedule. Ren Baker basically got hired and sat down his first presser and said, yeah, these 11 Power Fours and going on the road every year in game one, it's not where it's at for this program. And then Neal Brown made the little jab about we got to get out of the Alabama game even this season. So with all of that said, do you have a reaction? How do you see that being filled to you? I mean, immediately to me, that again signals they're trying to get out of that Alabama game, which they've been publicly trying to get out of, because a lot of the options everyone is throwing out there are Power Four. I don't see how they would go into 11 Power Four another season with Bama as one of them off of everything that has been so publicly said.
Yeah. I am a little sad because I really like Power 5 teams playing at Group of 5 stadiums. I always think those are fun games.
Yeah.
Even if they're not competitive, I think it's fun for those smaller schools.
Big risk there, which is I think it's either usually not competitive or else there's major upset. Yeah.
But like you were saying, it's obviously they're trying to shuffle all the chairs around and get different games. You and I just talked about it earlier. This screams backyard brawl to me. Both sides keep talking about how much they want it, and right now there's a 3 or 4 year gap on the schedule.
Yeah, 3-year draft gap right now, 2028. Yeah,
and then the other part, I think it must have been Mike Kazaza. I was reading his story on it. He talked about if the SEC adds an additional conference game, Bama might end up voiding that contract.
I did see that. Yeah, and West Virginia might get lucky because right now, with so much of a conversation about money, no one out there thinks West Virginia can really afford to get out of the Alabama game. They can pay the $300,000 to get out of the ECU game. They're not going to. That would almost be wasting money to get out of the Alabama game. That would be a lot they'd have to pay. So they maybe also are aware. Maybe they know that they're going to be able to. Yeah, they could get out of it without having to really get out of it. Bama could have to be the team that pulls away because of that conference schedule. That's a great point. And then if that happens, I think that opens up the door. Yeah, the backyard brawl is brought up. I haven't fully looked into Pitt's schedule, but that could be brought up because that would continue with the home and home. Both schools have been public. They want to play it every year. The problem is, and I'm sure I sound annoying and I keep banging the drum, I would find it very hard to believe that Ren Baker would take the backyard brawl with the stipulation they would have to then play 11 Power 4 games. That is, so I would think that if it could scream backyard brawl, and maybe they do this in reverse where we get 2 weeks of a freak out where they add a Power 4 and then Bam is still there and everyone's wondering, wow, we now got the hardest schedule in the country on the out of conference. But I don't think Ren would do any of that if he didn't know he was getting out of the Bama game. Or you're going to see another Group of 5 in there if that Bama game is not moving. I guess that's the tea leaves. If you see a group of, because we got a lot of reports saying this announcement's going to come soon. If in coming days there's a Group of 5 ad to replace ECU, that tells me they already know the Bama game is untouchable, can't happen. Ren got a phone call from the SEC. We can't do it. It's not going down, and he already knows it. Or else I don't think he'd schedule it. If you see a Power 4 ad, they're still trying to get out of the Bama game. To me. Because that would be wild to play the brawl and Bama. And you'd absolutely that game, especially 2026, because then that game would have to be on the road. That's another thing. That game would then have to be on the road in Pittsburgh. I don't think Ren would want to have a whole out of conference schedule that's basically on the road either.
Well, that Bama game in 26 is here.
Yeah, it starts and they have the back-to-back with Bama. So
the home and home with Alabama.
Yeah, they have the home and home with Bama. Yeah. So that maybe they could do that. Yeah, I mean the Ohio game next season is actually in Ohio because of that. Because otherwise they'd have every out of conference game would be in Morgantown, and the brawl is obviously in Morgantown next year. It'll be interesting. Semi-surprising news.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone knew they were trying to get out of the Alabama game. They were even saying it in press conferences, but nobody was really talking about other games they maybe would get out of. And Mike was definitely first on it. He usually is with the schedule stuff, but it'll be interesting how they replace it. It could definitely be the brawl, and I'm all for them playing the brawl every year, but It also could be that the other end of this too, as we kind of wrap up the show, maybe Ren knows something about. There's been rumors too of the Big 12 and how they format in their schedule. The ACC has an 8-game conference schedule and 4 out of conference games. That's how Pitt plays 10 Power Fours, even though they end up playing multiple Power Fours out of conference play. This year they played Cincinnati and West Virginia. If there's any tea leaves that Ren Baker is aware of, that the Big 12 would go to 8. Maybe they're going to expand. If they expand, they might drop one. If they go to 8 conference games, then okay. Maybe then you can add the brawl, and then you can keep Bama, and then you can have 2 other games that you feel like are lock wins. That would open up that door too. So there's a lot of things to look out for on what maybe Ren Baker thinks is going to occur. But if there's a scenario hypothetically in 2 years where they're sitting there going in that season and they got 2 Power Fours and an out-of-conference schedule with only 3 out-of-conference games, I need an answer on how that happened, because they have been very open that they don't want that to be the case. But right now, they can move down that path. Cody Nespor, Mike Asti here. That'll do it for this edition of Mountaineer Report. Make sure to like, subscribe, find us on YouTube, but also everywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Google Play, Spotify, etc., and all of our coverage at WV Sports Now.